given the current scenario where there's a waiver until Monday for Warner Brothers Discovery to speak to Paramount, has Netflix got the means and the will to improve its bid if it needs to? And that wasn't really answered.
Well, I think you got to step back. I think one of the points that I think Lucas sort of ignored in asking Ted, he was talking about, isn't the bid for the whole company simpler? And the answer is, obviously, bidding for one whole company is obviously simpler. But what he's missing is the Warner board. And what really started this entire process was a desire to split the company, right? To separate the studio streaming assets from the linear TV business. That was considered mission critical. And I think, the challenge now is Netflix, by buying only the streaming and studio, is not preventing Warner Brothers from affecting the split this summer. Paramount is. They want to stop the split. They need the cash flow from those, they're dying, but, those high free cash flow cable network assets to finance this. And so they're trying to stop the split. But the Warner board wants a split because, God forbid, Trump changes his mind. Like we've seen Tegna, Nexstar, like you have certainly seen Trump change his mind. If for any reason Trump or even a foreign regulator blocks the Paramount Warner Brothers deal, you would not have split the company, right, and you'd be in 2027. And I think there's a lot more value, sort of an intangible, but a real value to that split that I think there's been a tremendous amount of just ignoring in what I've read in sort of the press about this. And so I think that piece is really important. But to answer your very specific question, I do think if Netflix had to raise by 5 to 10% their bid, I think they would. And so I think the only way Paramount wins is with a knockout bid, something in the 35 to 40 range, probably 36, 37. I doubt Netflix chases that high.
On the network's linear TV piece, I think we asked him later on why, and Mr. Sarandos' answer is pretty simple. We're not in that business. But he'd already said those are the assets for sale. What we did talk about was the movie business, theaters, right? And Bloomberg had reported that the DOJ is talking to that industry to assess what they think will happen. And, the simple argument Mr. Sarandos makes is that Warner Brothers has not just been making the IP for 100 years. Their distribution at theaters is excellent. That would be an advantage to Netflix. Do you see that?
Look, Netflix is not in the theatrical distribution business. I think they certainly have recognized that theatrical can add a marketing power to some of their content. You look at how they put Stranger Things in movie theaters. They put K-pop Demon Hunters a couple of times in movie theaters. So, they actually released a lot of movies with, shorter windows. But there was a lot of movies. I think probably 20 movies released in theaters last year by Netflix. And so, I don't think there's a wholesale aversion. Do they believe that the movie business needs to change? I think they do. I mean, look, movie theater attendance, forget about this whole Netflix discussion for a second. Movie theater box office in the last 12 months is 25% below where it was pre-pandemic. And that's just box office. Actual butts in seats, attendance is down 50% from pre-pandemic. So the bottom line is the theater business is in a very, very dark, troubled place. The reality is you need people that are investing in the entertainment business. And, the reality is Netflix has certainly shown a history of investing very aggressively in content all around the world. Look, we'll see. Paramount says they're going to make 30 movies, but Disney also said they were going to keep Fox as a fully independent studio. And cost-cutting eventually drove that production right back down. And so there's very few incremental movies from Disney today. And so, I don't know. I'm sort of skeptical that anyone would ever try to actually make 30 movies because you can't make 10 or 15 movies profitably, let alone 30.
Paramount has until Monday to do something, right? Because
Not
right now
really.
it's just
that's sort of a red herring.
Okay, so go with that. Not really. So what happens next?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, look, the board has a fiduciary. If you're the board of Warner Brothers, you have a fiduciary responsibility up until the vote, right? Like, so if Paramount came in the night before with a knockout bid, $35 or $38, all cash, debt guaranteed by the Ellison, so you don't have to worry about solvency and closing and all of that, the board would have to listen. So, like, sure, they are definitely trying to force a best and final out of Paramount, who's been asking to talk to the board for quite, probably for a couple of months now. But my point just being that even if it doesn't happen on Monday, it theoretically could happen later. Time is obviously running out. You're down to, effectively 4 weeks from today, there's going to be a shareholder vote. And I think without a
March
meaningful
20th.
increase from Paramount, Netflix is going to win that vote.
To your mind, Rich, we just have 30 seconds, but which is most logical? Remind us where you stand.
Unless, if I was Paramount, I would not dramatically raise my bid. They really believe that regulatory-wise will fail. I would play that out. I think overpaying if you're Paramount and over-levering does not make sense. I'd rather lose and invest on my own, sort of the way Netflix did for a decade, than overpay. And so I hope Paramount doesn't do something, quote-unquote, price stupid, but we'll see over the next few weeks.